Hello and good evening to everybody in Israel. Lovely of you to join us this evening. I've got a fantastic panel of people that really I'm kind of in awe. And we were just talking beforehand, and Victoria, totally in awe. So we have the amazing, we'll start with you actually. So a little bit of an introduction I think would be great if you can give us 2 minutes about who you are, what you do, and why you're so passionate about what you do. That would be great. So Victoria, ladies first.
Okay. So we have the probably or obviously the oldest Israeli law firm dealing with surrogacy abroad for Israelis. We do this from 2008. And before I had my own office, I was working in another firm where I assisted the first ever cases of Israelis who did surrogacy abroad. So I also am responsible for creating the process of getting the kids acknowledged in Israel, doing their naturalizations or getting them an Israeli citizenship. And we're also responsible for a vast majority of legal precedents that allow you to get your paternity leave, to get some reimbursement from the Social Insurance Institute, that allow you to switch your parental leave, that allow you many things, that allow you to get acknowledged as both parents, doing the second parentage without a home study by a social worker. We have a few cases in the Supreme Court. So we assist with the surrogacy process itself, meaning creating your baby with maximum security in being on your side, helping the intended parents throughout the process. And we do all of these surrounding processes that help secure them as a family unit, meaning their contracts, which can be contracts about your financial aspect or your co-parenting agreements, your estate planning, getting acknowledged as both parents. We are a law firm of 3 lawyers. We work together for many years as a team, which gives us another advantage. And we are members of the ABA, American Bar Association, which Steve Snyder has brought me into, and of the International Academy of Attorneys in the field of assisted reproduction and adoption. And we are the only law firm in Israel who is member of both the ABA and the Quad A and SEED, so all international organizations which help us do our job at best, in most professional way and ethical, and enlarge our network of professionals that we work with.
Brilliant, thank you, and amazing. Steve Snyder, would you like to go next?
I would love to, Richard. Thank you very much. So I'm Steve Snyder. I'm primarily an attorney that has been practicing surrogacy law here in the United States since 1991. And that 30-year history is far more extensive than most other attorneys in the area here. In that capacity, I initiated and built the ABA Assisted Reproductive Technology Committee from very small origins into a very large and influential body in the surrogacy world that encompasses attorneys not only all across the United States, but around the world, like the wonderful Victoria. That organization has, under my direction, promulgated national proposed legislation in the United States in the form of the ABA Model Act. I've also been on the committee to address and implement the Uniform Parentage Act, which is another opportunity to legislate surrogacy here by the Uniform Law Commission in the United States. And I've sat on many international bodies of mixed reviews about surrogacy in other countries. So I have a very broad national and international awareness of what surrogacy is, how it's perceived, and the issues that need to be properly addressed in order to have a safe journey, especially across international borders, and to do the journey in such a way that we protect the process for those that want to follow us. In addition to that legal background, I started working for an agency in 1991 when I did my first parentage proceeding. And that agency that I started working for was literally the first surrogacy agency that was ever created in the United States in 1982. I took that agency over in 2002, so I have now been operating it for the last 20 years. But that 40-year-old agency has also been a pioneer in the surrogacy agency world and has been the template for learning what mistakes can be made and now avoiding those mistakes. So we are a preeminent agency that I believe has the highest ethical standards, the deepest legal knowledge, and the biggest heart in leading you in your journey. And one of the things I think that evidences that is the preeminent professionals from Victoria in Israel to Said in California to Richard in the UK, all have IARC, my agency, on their tongue when they do talk to clients about suitable agencies.
And that's 100% accurate. Dr. Daneshmand, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. First off, it's a pleasure to join you tonight. As you may know, over the course of the last 13 years, I have been taking care of many intended parents in Israel in collaboration with my wonderful colleagues, Steve Snyder and Victoria. And especially now during this sort of period of pandemic, because of restrictions on travel, with the help of our colleagues, we've been able to find ways in which intended parents can freeze their gametes, sperm, eggs, embryos in their respective countries, and for us to be able to work with our colleagues to be able to transport those to our center here in San Diego, California. I've been in practice for 23 years. I did my training at the University of California in Los Angeles at UCLA, my residency and fellowship. And really during that time, I've had the honor of accompanying many intended parents in their journeys to creating their families. My first surrogacy case was about 21 years ago when intended fathers came to my office. They came with two friends. One of them was going to be their surrogate, the other one their egg donor. And those kids are now, I think, close to 19 years of age. So it's really an honor not only to be able to accompany intended parents in their journeys to creating their families, but also to work with wonderful agencies such as IARC, what that is one of the top agencies in the United States, and also with wonderful colleagues, Victoria Gelfand. That's really one of the great pleasures of being able to have this incredible collegial relationship. During the last 20 plus years, I've also been involved in a great deal of research and publications that has really contributed a great deal to the field of in vitro fertilization. We have published papers. In fact, we published the first group of papers looking at and comparing fresh versus frozen embryo transfers. We published papers on the classification of embryos, grading. How do we grade embryos from a group of embryos? How do we select the one that's the strongest that can lead to a higher rate of pregnancy and a healthy delivery? Many clinics around the country, around the world, actually use our classification and grading system to assess embryos. Currently, I'm one of the principal investigators in a global study, including European and Middle Eastern clinics, looking at non-invasive PGTA, meaning instead of performing a biopsy on the embryo, what we're doing is we're analyzing the DNA that the embryo sheds into the culture media, so that we don't have to touch the embryo in the future or perform a biopsy. We also, in the last 2 years, have done research on how do we maximize sperm quality, and we've developed a technique called microfluidics or zymote in order to maximize the DNA quality of the sperm that we select for fertilization of the eggs. So it's really an honor to be with you and to answer your questions and concerns and to help you on your journey to this amazing journey of becoming parents. As a father of 3 daughters, 2 teenagers, and one who just graduated from the teenage years at 20 years of age, I understand both the joys and the challenges of having children, and I'm very excited to help you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. D. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Richard Westerby. I work for the San Diego Fertility Center based out of London, helping all of the European and international, in the eyes of an American, international clients. And it's a great pleasure to, I feel a bit of imposter syndrome because I'm surrounded by 3 amazing professionals who are just at the top of their game. And this is me. I have a child. I have 2. I have twins that are 8. So as you can see by this one, this is one of them. I'm a dad. I've been through the process, and my role is to help people to navigate that. I think today we're going to run through very briefly. So Dr. Daneshmand is going to talk through some of the medical bits, then Steve's going to talk through some of the legal bits in the US, and then Victoria is going to finish off talking through some of the legal implications in Israel. If anybody has any questions, please put them into the chat. I will either answer them at the end or ask somebody to answer them at the end, or if they're pertinent and they're relevant to that section, we will answer those too. It's great. We've got nearly 50 people on, which is fantastic. So thank you all so much for giving up your evening to listen to us. Dr. Daneshmand, I think the topic that most people around the world, probably not so much in Israel because you're steaming ahead with your vaccination program, but that most people around the world want to know how COVID-19 has changed the medical landscape from a surrogacy perspective, egg donor perspective. And so could you give us some of the latest updates on that and whether or not people should be getting vaccinated as they're approaching running up into a cycle, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, like many things during the pandemic, this has sort of been almost a, there's sort of a dual effects of the pandemic. You know, one has been the suffering, the loss that people have felt, as my good friend and colleague Steve talks about, you know, the loss of human touch. You know, we're used to seeing our intended parents, you know, seeing our the children that we have helped create, and really it's part of our what we do, and it inspires us to do greater work and better work. So that loss, and of course the loss of many people who've lost their loved ones during the pandemic, and the suffering that people have endured, that has been on top of our mind. The other thing that has caused us to do is to pivot, is to find solutions, be creative about how can we help intended parents. There's still an incredible desire to have a family. Even more so, what we have found, I think all 4 of us, is that during this time of the pandemic, the desire to have a family has only grown stronger. And so how do we help those intended parents around the world to still continue moving forward with their journeys to create their families? And so again, part of that has been the collaborators that we've had, whether it's in Israel or in Europe or in Australia, being able to transport sperm, freeze sperm, use the same great protocols that we have, freeze sperm and transport it to us so those intended parents can move forward. From a legal perspective, when intended parents have to come here for the delivery of their children, really the leaders such as Steve Snyder have been at the helm of creating documents to allow people entry, these future parents entry into the United States so they can be here for the delivery of their children. So I think that's also has been incredible. And I don't think we've had any thus far intended parents who haven't been able to come here for the delivery of their children. Now, in regard to the vaccine and the recommendations for the vaccine, initially when the pandemic started and kind of spread, we didn't have enough information about the virus. But now there have been many good studies, many studies published in many journals, The Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine. And what we know about the virus is the following. Number one, we know that there's no evidence of vertical transmission from the mother to the fetus, which was really good news through a series of studies initially back in April, May, June of 2020. We know that if a woman has been vaccinated or has had COVID and has neutralizing antibodies, those antibodies can actually be transferred through the placenta to the newborn, thus conferring some level of protection, although the duration is unknown, for the newborn. The other thing that we know is that the vaccine itself, especially the vaccines that are not currently available, are very, very effective. These vaccines have been probably one of the most incredible, amazing feats in medical history because of the timing of how quickly they were developed. And it wasn't that they skipped any portion of the studies or phases of all the clinical studies. It's just that the pandemic allowed them, and in fact, the second wave of pandemic allowed them, these particular companies, to really test out the vaccine. So all of the trials included well over 34,000 participants, whether it was a Moderna trial, the Pfizer, the Johnson & Johnson. And what we found was that in the real world, these vaccines have been extremely effective. I mean, some of the best studies actually have come out of Israel in terms of the protection that the vaccines have caused and the immunity that they have discovered based on these vaccines. Some of the studies recently have come out of Israel in terms of, you know, what the level of protection is after the first dose of vaccine for Pfizer and Moderna, and what the level of protection is the second. So we're now seeing real world data out there. And I'm also very proud of the medical community because not only are we seeing real world data, but we're also seeing real time and real world data on the side effects of the vaccine. So for example, you have heard about the Johnson & Johnson, out of 7 million doses administered in the United States, there were 7 cases of blood clots, so 1 out of 1 million. And we are proud of the fact that there is really very significant follow-up on side effects of the vaccine. So really the medical community should be commended for the work they've done. The only way to vanquish the virus is through herd immunity. You in Israel are very, very close to it. In fact, I think you are #1 on the list of countries that have been able to achieve close to herd immunity with your vaccination. And here in the United States, we're vaccinating about 3.2 million people per day, and hoping that fairly soon, probably by July, that we'll be able to achieve herd immunity, meaning about 70 to 80% of the population being vaccinated. So the other thing is that there is patient autonomy when it comes to the vaccine. So we can't force surrogates to take the vaccine. We have to let them know about our recommendations and potential benefits of the vaccine. But the good news is that even those who don't take the vaccine, if you're pregnant and you test positive for the vaccine, based on a Columbia University study published in New England Journal of Medicine, the majority of 88% of those who were pregnant and tested positive either had no symptoms or mild symptoms, and the risk of hospitalization and death was very, very low among pregnant patients who tested positive. So this is a little bit of update, and obviously the news about the vaccine changes because we're having real world data now on millions and millions of people getting vaccinated every day around the globe. But we are one world, and that's the way I always think about it. The only way we're going to vanquish this virus is if the world vanquishes this virus. So for us, we have to do everything, and I think all countries, incumbent upon all countries, is that if there's a surplus of vaccine in one region, we have to help our brothers and sisters around the world to be able to achieve herd immunity, because this is not a one country success. This is about world success, and that's the only way I think we're going to be able to get over this particular pandemic.
And on that note, obviously, I don't want to get into politics, but I think when you have a surrogate who is, for example, in the lead up to a transfer, or you have an egg donor who is in the lead up to egg donor cycle, and she's offered a vaccine, at what point do you say, okay, don't take it just yet? Up to what point can you do it? Or at what point can you say you're now safe to take it so that it's not going to impact either the egg donation or the transfer or the pregnancy?
There's no evidence that the vaccine has any effect on fertility, on egg quality, on sperm quality, or on the ability of the embryo to attach, implant. Therefore, theoretically, surrogates, patients can get the vaccine, egg donors can get the vaccine anytime. Now, my concern has been that the eggs are very sensitive to temperature fluctuations, especially elevations of temperature. In other words, if you have an egg donor that we're taking care of, and she develops a fever during her stimulation, that can have an effect on the egg quality. So therefore, what I like to do is to recommend for patients not to have the vaccine during the time of IVF stimulation, from the time of IVF stimulation to the time it ends. Because if they end up having these side effects, in which really the main side effect, which we're concerned about, is fever, then the fever can affect egg quality. The same thing with embryo transfer. We don't want temperature elevations around the time when we're transferring the embryo, because the embryo is sensitive to the effects of temperature. Imagine how fastidious and meticulous we are in the laboratory in terms of our conditions, whether it's oxygen concentration, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, but also about temperature. Slight temperature fluctuations in the laboratory, in the incubator, can have an effect on the ability of the embryo to develop. So the same thing happens when we transfer. We don't want the vaccination to occur during the time when we're preparing the uterus. Now, that's only about a 3-week period of time, 2.5 to 3 weeks. But outside of those areas of IVF stimulation and endometrial preparation and embryo transfer, the vaccine can be had and given at any time.
Brilliant, thank you. I guess the next question then really is the impact of travel on COVID and not being able to fly into the United States. How has that, what have we done? And you know, with regards to sperm freezing around the world, you know, can you talk a little bit about what can be done for our Israeli clients?
Having incredible colleagues like Victoria, like Steve, incredible colleagues around the world, in Europe, in Israel, in Australia, and having strong relationships, be it research or, you know, collegial relationships, because we've been working together for many years. In fact, I think I met Victoria about maybe 8 years ago at a conference in Tel Aviv, and I remember her texting me saying, you know, I'm upstairs, I look forward to meeting you. And that was our first meeting. I think it was about maybe 8-9 years ago. I don't even remember how long ago I met Steve, but having these incredible collegial relationships with colleagues around the world, with researchers around the world, has allowed us to collaborate with them so that we can freeze sperm in different parts of the world with the same techniques, the same security and safety that we do it right here, so that we can transport the sperm over to us, or eggs, or embryos, and allow intended parents to move forward with their journeys. So whilst we are delighted and we'd love to welcome intended parents to our center, and we have an incredible and amazing center, very impressive. We like intended parents to come visit us, meet the team, and really get a sense of who's taking care of them. But in this time of the pandemic, that's not possible, at least for now. We hope it will be soon in the coming months. But in the interim, intended parents can still follow their dream of creating their families because of the work that not only we have done, but really the work that our colleagues have done. You know, there's a lot of acknowledgement and appreciation and gratitude that we have to give to our colleagues around the world.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think in a nutshell, if you are interested in moving forward, you are able to do your sperm freeze in Israel. You're able to do blood work that is sent from Israel to the United States for testing in the US under FDA rules, and then we can ship that sperm from Israel to the United States, which then means that you only realistically need to fly to the US for the birth of your child. And that has kept the dream alive for a lot of people this year. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Dr. Daneshmand. We're now going to move on to Steve Snyder. Steve, obviously that's from a medical perspective. We've spoken a lot about how COVID has changed the medical landscape and how people are moving forward. Can you talk us through a little bit about how it's changed the surrogacy landscape and what protocols are now in place and what are happening? Have your contracts changed? Just talk us through a little bit of that, if you can, please.
Well, COVID's obviously an all-encompassing global issue, and it touches every aspect of surrogacy, on the medical side, on the agency side, on the legal side. The first thing people often ask me is, did it affect the number of women that wanted to be surrogates and the availability and the waiting time? Because that's always a question for people. And actually what we found is the number of applicants or leads that came in during COVID was not substantially affected. If there were those that didn't want to enter into the process during the pandemic, they were made up for by those that had economic compromise and were looking for other ways to enhance the economic status of their family. So the leads stayed relatively stable. The flow of surrogates stayed relatively stable. Those surrogates, in addition, were largely willing to go through all of the procedures that were required by the clinic, whether local to them or traveling to the clinic, because of the processes and assurances the clinics gave them about social distancing and safe procedures at their clinics. The issue of contracting, I have a 54-page single-spaced contract, as Victoria well knows. It didn't get that way overnight. It gets that way every time something comes up. So did it affect my contract? Well, of course it did. It's now 55 pages long, single spaced. But in any event, there are certain issues that need to be negotiated and included in the contract, the most fundamental of which Said Daneshmand has already addressed. The parents and the surrogates need to be matched, and then they need to document whether the surrogate's going to be vaccinated, because there are some surrogates that will and some won't. There are some parents that want them to and some that don't. And that is a fundamental matching criteria and needs to be documented in the contract, along with other issues about extended stays, if they contract COVID while they're traveling, and other issues in terms of unexpected consequences of the process. What happens if a carrier travels, contracts COVID in connection with travel for your process? Those things don't have uniform resolutions. Those are to be negotiated between the parties. So there are multiple layers of that a knowledgeable, experienced attorney are going to guide you through. And I urge you to get a knowledgeable, experienced attorney, because not everybody is aware of the nuances of those kinds of issues. Beyond that, COVID has 4 basic impacts on the surrogacy process from a legal or practical perspective. And when COVID first hit and there were travel bans and the clinics were shut down for 1 or 2 months and everybody was pulling their head in and not doing anything, everybody was trying to figure out how to navigate these. Dr. Daneshmand and I appeared on a national panel to talk to people about the effects of COVID and the solutions that were out there, and we have fashioned solutions. An experienced attorney or agency is going to get you into the country for your birth. We have communicated with our State Department in Washington and the satellite embassies in all of the countries we've worked in, so that there is a settled procedure and a set form of documentation that needs to be supplied by the parents to the embassy, forwarded to DC, approved by DC, and sent back for travel documents. And again, a knowledgeable, experienced attorney will know what exceptions to the travel bans exist and how to get that visa in light of those travel bans because of a surrogate birth. That will not be an impediment. That is not universal across all attorneys and agencies, I might say. There have been publicized cases of babies without parents for months. That should not happen. So be careful about interviewing the people you consider working with to make sure what their experience is and that they can reassure you about that. It's very important. You don't deserve additional stress. The second way COVID affects it is for a period of time, hospitals were either letting nobody but patients in, or perhaps only 1 person per patient, so parents could not both be in the hospital with their child upon birth. And again, over the course of the last year, through substantial advocacy on our part with all of the hospitals we deal with, and this should be true wherever you go if the agency and the attorneys they contract with know what they're doing. But we have managed to successfully condition hospitals that this is a birth, that there are two parents, that the parents need to be in the hospital. And whether it's with quarantine or without, and right now it's pretty much without, as long as you travel in and get a test and are not positive, they will let you in. And many hospitals will let you in without a test. So that issue has been resolved and is stable. Both of you, if there are two parents, will be allowed in the hospital. The next issue is the courts and the vital records offices have had abeyances. Some of them have shut down. Again, the adjustment to COVID has resulted in courts now converting over to all Zoom hearings. So their timing and process for getting the orders necessary for you to go home are still solid and still expedited. And the vital records departments are open and again, still expediting the vital records. The last part of the process is getting you home. And the US Immigration Passport Office, not quite so efficient. So we are working with numerous foreign embassies for temporary travel documents, and Israeli travel documents, if you will talk to Victoria about that, are obtainable, and your ability to return home with your baby is secure. So all of the things that COVID has thrown at us, from the medical to the legal, we have creatively found solutions for it.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really important. And I think just from a high level, taking all of that into account, can you maybe run through some of your thoughts on how does one manage a successful surrogacy family building journey?
Well, a cross-border surrogacy journey has numerous moving parts, and you need multiple experts to successfully navigate them, because no one expert is expert in all those parts. The first thing I tell every intended parent is, your journey is to have a child, and the clinic is critical to that, or you won't have one. But your journey doesn't stop there. You want a child of whom you are a parent in the country where you reside and for whom you have citizenship of the type desired. That is an end point. And I always encourage everyone to start at the end point. In other words, in Israel, check with Victoria, say, is the process stable? Are there any political movements that may affect that? Is there a timetable I need to be worried about? Can it be done? How will it be done? What is the cost? Because when you talk to me about the cost in the US, I'm not going to be talking about the cost when you go home. That's something else you have to budget for. So I say start with that end point, verify your ability to be successful in your final analysis, then come over here and put the components together. And that is a successful medical clinic that has a specific focus on surrogacy, especially international surrogacy. Any clinic is not comparable to any other clinic, because clinics develop protocols and procedures to enhance their success depending on the kinds of processes they have. And as Dr. Daneshmand said, that's integrating foreign clinics to collect sperm, successfully transport it over for use in the process in light of travel bans. So having an experienced clinic in cross-border surrogacy that can facilitate all of the exceptions that are necessary to have a successful process now is critical. Then I think you need a very good agency, because the clinic has a specific expertise to create that embryo transferred and give you a pregnancy. But there are financial issues, there are insurance issues, there are psychological issues, there are legal issues, there are administrative, scheduling and travel issues, and the clinic hasn't the expertise in those areas. And your agency is the one that needs to pull all those threads together. Some agencies that are coupled with law firms like IARC have the capacity to pull all of those threads into one staff and one process. Other agencies have the ability to refer you out to other professionals that can fill in the gaps that they can't provide. Both kinds of agencies can be successful. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but you need one or the other, either one that can handle all the strands or one that can reliably, through depth of experience, refer you out to competent professionals to carry on those tasks. So an agency is critical to your process to keep all of the moving parts in the US in sequence without missing any. And then you need an attorney. You need an attorney to establish your parentage here. You need an attorney to sow or till the soil properly so that when you go home, it's easy for Victoria or another attorney in Israel to establish your parentage there. There are ways and forms. The one wonderful case Victoria and I had was a single woman in Israel who used donor egg and donor sperm, and they went to court to make her a parent, and the court resisted, and the court told Victoria, well, clearly they didn't tell the US court that she wasn't the mother. And Victoria said, do you have a transcript of that judgment? And I gave her a transcript where I read in about 20 questions, clearly addressing to the court that this was not her egg. And Victoria wrote back and said, I had no idea your transcripts were that detailed. And based on that alone, that woman got parentage. So you do need the combination of the ability to work between your US attorney and your attorney at home. But if you put all of those parts together with professionals that have knowledge and experience, you will be safe and you will be successful.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. And I think that leads us nicely on to Victoria, who is held in very high esteem by all of us, as I'm sure you can probably tell. Victoria, I was wondering if you could possibly, I think we've touched on a number of things that obviously from a US perspective, but I also think really importantly from an Israeli perspective. So maybe if you could talk us through choosing service providers when you want to start this journey, as Steve was just talking about, like the legal implications for Israelis on surrogacy abroad, and how to be recognized when you're flying home, and then also something we've all touched on is COVID and any additional perspectives that you might have with regards contracts. So that was a lot that I've just thrown at you. I'm sorry. So if you could maybe start with choosing service providers and legal implications, and then the other bits we can talk about.
Let's do it one by one, or as we say in Hebrew, cow by cow.
Let's go cow by cow. I like that.
Okay. So as you have so far understood, for your process in the US, you have two main players. You have your agency and you have the IVF clinic. The agency would locate, screen, match you with the best suitable surrogate for you, and then they will assist you throughout the process with the surrogate during the pregnancy, up to the birth and after the birth, until all of your arrangements have been completed. The IVF clinic is there to screen everyone for good health, so the intended parents and the egg donor and the surrogate, and to create embryos and to create the pregnancy. So these two main players, the usual way in the US is you just go directly to them and you work directly with them. In Israel and in not too many other countries, there are local facilitators, so local agencies that connect you with the US-based service providers, and then usually for them to cover for their additional costs, they would choose cheaper providers. So when you work with those additional facilitators, some are better, some are not as much. So what you should do is check their added value for money and choose who their local providers are, how experienced they are, and how they safeguard your interests if anything happens and doesn't go in the best possible way. Because this is the field where, unlike math, nothing is 100%. So sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. And even if you have the leading clinic in the world, which gives you 80% chances of implantation of a single embryo, you still have 20% that won't, meaning 1 out of 5 attempts or 1 out of 5 families who have tried will not be able to get pregnant during the first attempt. And when you count those attempts, this is only from those tries which actually led to an embryo transfer. Sometimes the surrogate is disqualified somewhere before. During the medical phase, during the medical screening, during the contract phase, things can go badly, and then it comes to play how good is the service that you're getting from your local providers, how strong is the back that they give you for the process. So sometimes when you go to a program which says we have available surrogates, and you can choose from those available surrogates, and then you would only contract with those agencies after you have already found yourself a surrogate. You should, people don't always do that, but you should check how deep is the pre-screening that such a candidate received before you were matched with them. Because those candidates, they go through background checks and they have to get all their medical files and be read by a doctor, and psychological assessment, and sometimes home study. So a lot of things to be checked before you're matched with them, because if they don't meet all these requirements, they will be disqualified from your process. And it means that if you're getting someone that you really like, most of these women are really likable, they're good people. And the only question is, will it be able to work for the process? Will they qualify? So if you choose your agency by your surrogate belonging to that agency without checking how experienced that agency is and how strongly they will support you for the journey, and then the surrogate, that person who you got attached to was disqualified and you remain without that surrogate that you like, and with an attachment to an agency which may not do the best job. So it usually would serve your interests better to choose your service providers by their qualities and experience and how well they serve your interest, and not by the personal attachment to a donor, to a surrogate, and because they may change and not be with you throughout the process. COVID had an impact on that as well. If in the past we have seen our own statistics, maybe around 25% of families who needed a rematch with a surrogate at least once during their journey, meaning they were matched with a surrogate they thought they would work with, but then it didn't work for any reason during the last screening processes or during the negotiations of the contract, or she did not respond to medications and did not even undergo an embryo transfer, or she underwent the transfer, which was not successful, was disqualified at some point, or she just quit the process, she got divorced, she had medical issues, she got into a car accident, whatever the cause is. So in the past, our own statistics, out of approximately 80 plus cases that we have running each given time, we had about 25% of families who had to change their surrogate at least once. Some of them had to change more than once. During the year of COVID, when a few months ago, I have checked our own statistics, I saw that it raised to about 40%. Because sometimes if both the surrogate and her husband lose their jobs and find themselves not financially stable, they may be disqualified because they are not financially stable for the process and their only source of income would be this surrogacy. What if she does not succeed? That would be a catastrophe for her. So she may be disqualified for that. Or maybe someone of the family members got ill, or her parents, or some other difficulties that this pandemic brought with it. So once again, it raised the importance of how your interests are safeguarded by your agency. When you get someone's opinion and recommendation about service providers, sometimes you hear, wow, we had such a great process. You should listen to what they're saying and try to analyze, was their experience just purely accidental because things just turned out well? Because in some journeys, things just turn out well. No one's not to blame, but to thank for things just getting okay, but it just happened. So it can happen in a very new agency, it can happen in an experienced agency, but if things do not go well, then how was your process supported by the agency? An agency that is coming with, they only had successes before, they're probably quite new in the field. You should look into agencies that had failures in the past, because you only learn through failure. So you should inquire the people that you talk to and get their recommendations. What happened when things did not go smoothly? How much of a support they got? How their problems were solved? Or maybe when the problems were just coming, just you saw them vaguely and the agency was able to solve them before they even became a big problem. So with the agency, this is mostly with the rematches to other surrogates. So will it be at an additional cost to get another surrogate? Your surrounding costs about it, you will need to make additional contracts with an additional surrogate, additional screen. How much all of that will cost you? Does your agency understand insurance? Insurance changes yearly. So this is such a huge topic of insurance that would cover surrogacy or that would not exclude surrogacy. You can start working with a surrogate who had an insurance that would cover surrogacy, and then the calendar year ended, a new year began, and her insurance stopped covering. Will the agency even check it? Will they notice in time to buy her another insurance? Will they have the knowledge? Will they have the team to do that without you asking, that they will do it themselves? That's another strength you should look at in your agency. With the clinic, what happens if your chosen egg donor is disqualified at some point? If she starts medications and they see that she does not have enough follicles, so you should drop the cycle and not extract the eggs, or not enough embryos were created, or you cannot get pregnant with the surrogate. The Israeli clientele, Israeli intended parents, are very unique, and not all US-based IVF clinics or world-based IVF clinics are equipped to serve the specific needs of the Israeli intended parents, who, unlike their European friends, they want to have more than one child. They want to have 2 or 3 kids. If it's a same-sex couple, they want to have genetic children of each one of them. And they want these children to share genetic material through the egg donor. So they will need a big enough pool of embryos created from that egg donor so that they will have much more issues and potential things that can go wrong during their attempt to create a big enough pool of embryos to start their, not just to start, but to have a big enough family as they plan. Europeans just want, they want one child. So even if they get 1 or 2 embryos from the egg donor, well, they have a child, so that's enough, and we're done. Okay. Legal implications, contracts with different providers. There is always a thought, or often I hear a thought that, well, it's all templates. You sign with the clinic on the template, you sign with the agency. It's all just forms, and you cannot change them anyway. So we just sign them as they are. Wrong. Almost all contracts in the process can be modified and personalized to be better suitable for your own interest. If someone is there to actually ask what your interests are and ask what your, the weak points are, so that to try to protect them. If you do not have your own attorney through the process, then, and I'm sorry, Steve, I know that you're with your whole heart for your clients, but when an agency gives a retaining agreement and an agency contract to their clients, those contracts are usually drafted by the agency's attorneys for the benefit of the agency. They're not meant to serve your needs. They usually serve the agency's need. So let's put Steve aside. Maybe his contract is okay, but in general, we're speaking about surrogacy in general. So if you just, when you just start your journey, you don't know the service provider, you don't know what to look for in the contract. You know how to read the words in this retaining agreement. You may understand every word that you read. You may not necessarily understand how they combine into an idea. You may not know what to look for that is missing, what junctions you may reach in your process that are not at all protected, or your interests in those junctions will not be protected by your contract with the agency or the donor or the clinic or the surrogate, etc. You have different mentality than the mentality of those Americans, the gringos. And when you do not have an attorney that not only speaks English, you may probably all people who attend this seminar, webinar, they speak English, all right? Otherwise, they would have left by now. So you have English, but you don't necessarily know how to communicate your wishes and your interests in those ways that would meet the what the US service providers would be willing to give and settle for. So it's not that you're confrontational parts, it's just you don't necessarily speak the same language, meaning mentality. Israel is a country of advice givers. Everyone gives advice. We so love to give advice, whether we have our own experience, whether we just guess that this is what a good advice would be, whether our experience is relevant. It could be outdated. So your friends who had surrogacy and they have children who are 3 years old, it means they started their process maybe 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, because it takes time to make babies. That information may not be applicable at all because things change constantly. So things that were applicable 5 years ago, they may not be applicable anymore. And for Israelis, another specific thing is that because we are, I don't even know how to say it in English, kibbutz galuyot, it means we have gathered here from different countries. Many Israelis have additional citizenships. If you want your children to have additional citizenships like you have, it's something to think about from the get-go. So yes, children who are entitled for an Israeli citizenship by being your genetic children and to American citizenship by being born there, they can have additional citizenships if they are born to parents who hold those additional citizenships. But sometimes you will need a surrogate which is single, unmarried. Sometimes you will need a surrogate who agrees to be registered on the birth certificate as a mother. Otherwise, you cannot get a European citizenship if there is no mother listed on the birth certificate. So for same-sex couples, of course, it's not an issue for heterosexual intended parents. Sometimes the state where the surrogate lives will not allow you to do the process which will allow you the birth certificate in a way that will be required. So this is a consideration that you should make when thinking who to work with. About, like Richard said, additional thoughts on contracts during COVID and vaccination, so things that all of my esteemed colleagues here have touched before. So in the contract with the surrogate, yes, you would touch her willingness to receive the vaccine, but that would happen even before the contract. In your case, that would be during your match with the surrogate. You would check whether she's willing to get vaccinated. Sometimes it's an automatic disqualification for intended parents if their surrogate is not willing to get vaccinated. Do not try to press her into something that she's not, wholeheartedly willing to do, because at the time of when you actually need it, she may not do that, and you cannot force her into vaccinating or terminating the pregnancy or undergoing any prenatal testing. So if something doesn't seem to fit between your requests and her willingness, don't try to force that. When time comes, you may not be able to force that because all those arrangements and agreements where she says, yes, I'll defer to your requests. If she has to undergo amniocentesis, bdikat mei shafir, during week 20 of the pregnancy, and it takes you time to convince her or go to mediation or use whatever other attempts, and she reaches week 24, by then you've missed the window of time where it was even applicable, because you cannot terminate the pregnancy that far in the process. So lastly, about your getting recognized as the child's legal parents and flying home from the US. The process in Israel has 2 stages. When there is a family of 1 genetic parent and 1 non-genetic parent, it's one-step process if both intended parents in a heterosexual couple are genetic. If you have a same-sex couple when one of them has the sperm with which the embryo was created and the other one is the non-genetic parent, then you will need to have first process of naturalization based on the genetic relation to the Israeli parent, and second process will be for second parent adoption or a parentage order for the partner. So usually when children were born after US surrogacy, children would just get American passports, fly back to Israel, and complete the legal process here. During the last March, we had so many families that were just stuck without the ability to return home because mid-March 2020, the American passport services stopped. So we had to go to the court representing 17 families at that time and create a new emergency mode to undergo naturalization process during COVID. So you would get travel documents for the children through an Israeli embassy or consulate. And with those, you can travel back home without getting stuck in the US for many months after the birth. But when you go to the US for the birth, currently, we're still recommending families to fly at least a month before the anticipated date of birth, just because you cannot be as spontaneous as during normal times whenever there is an early birth. If your surrogate calls you and says, hey, I'm in labor, and it's a month before, you can't necessarily just book your next flight and go on that. There are things that have to be arranged because of COVID. There are not as many flights. You may need to be quarantined there. So yes, like Steve said, less and less hospitals require quarantine now, but during the summer months, we had mutual clients that we advised to go to the US sooner. They went there about a month before birth with a twin birth. The birth happened a few hours before they embarked on the flight. They reached the US. They were in a distance of just a few miles from the hospital where their twins were in the NICU. They could not visit their children because they were not allowed at the hospital. And just imagine what it's like to become a father, to have your children next door, and you cannot go there and be with them. So it's very frustrating. So planning ahead and getting all the good advice that you can to plan things and foresee things.
Brilliant, thank you. That's so much information. It's kind of crazy. We've had a raft of questions coming in. One question for Steve, exactly on what you were just talking about. Do you think the expedited issuing of passports will actually start to happen again in the next few months, or how long is the passport process taking?
I believe that we're at April. By the end, I'd say by fall, I expect the passport office to reopen.
Okay, so still a few months away.
Still a few months away. So those people that are having children in the next few months may have an issue. Anybody on this call that's considering starting surrogacy, in my humble opinion, most of the effects of COVID will be behind us by the time their process moves forward.
I agree. This is one, Victoria, for you. You did start talking about it, but I'm not entirely sure if you covered this one. Can you please say a few words about citizenships for children of a twin pregnancy when one of the fathers is Israeli and the other isn't? How does that work? In 2 minutes.
Yeah, so we had one case that we had to take up to Supreme Court, and unfortunately we lost. It was regarding to a couple where one of them was Israeli and another one was not. So it depends on the status that the foreigner has in Israel by the time of birth and the legal proceedings, because there is a gradual process of acquiring permanent status in Israel. At first you get temporary residency, then you have a permanent residency or citizenship. So during those years that you only have temporary residency, State of Israel does not want your relationship to be acknowledged with the child, because for them, it's too much to explain, and it's too bizarre, and really I wish I really understood the thinking of the state of Israel when they prefer to detach between the foreign parent and the child, and prefer that over, like, no, they're trying to get citizenship through the child. Yes, of course, we're spending $150,000 to have a child just so that the foreign partner gets citizenship through the child. So each case is different according to what their current status is, and we have changing legal status about it coming from legal proceedings, because there was another case judged just a few months ago which acknowledged the status of parentage. So it depends. Is it a twin birth? Is it that you're trying to think whose genetic child to have before and who's to go for later? Do you actually live in Israel, or so it really is hard to give just one definite answer.
So the person who answered that question, who just said thank you, by the way, please feel free to reach out to Victoria, because I think you need to have a much more in-depth conversation, knowing a little bit about your story. I think it's probably best if you talk to her. Dr. Daneshmand, one email has come through here saying somebody was looking at our egg donor database. Can you talk a little bit more about that, because it changed over, they looked at it a month ago and then they've looked at it now, and it's changed a bit. So can you talk a little bit about the egg donors? You're on mute. The words of 2020. You're on mute.
I am exactly. You're on mute.
That's going to be a first.
I love that. I'm going to get back at you on that one. Yes, if only our spouses could actually put us on mute from time to time.
They wish.
So on a serious note, we are very lucky and blessed to have a great egg donor database. We have a total of about 300 egg donors, but at any given time, roughly around 100 are available egg donors. Why? The other 200 are in the middle of a cycle, have been reserved by other intended parents. And the egg donor database is constantly in flux, meaning that we are recruiting new egg donors, and there's some egg donors that get reserved or going through a cycle. So the egg donor database today of available donors is not going to be the one that's going to be available in 1 month. There are two advantages, major advantages with our egg donor database. Number one, all of our egg donors have been pre-screened. So all the testing and screening has been done. Genetic screening, every one of them has met with our genetic counselor, Amy Vance, the head of Barrier Genetics. Egg quality screening has been done. We want to ensure genetic compatibility with you. So they've already done their carrier screening. We then need to send you your saliva test kits to do your genetic recessive mutation screening of over 300 mutations. All the screening has been done, psychological analysis on the egg donors before they're placed on the database. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is that we don't have an agency fee for presenting the egg donors to us, and that could roughly translate into a cost savings of somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000. Why? Because if you use a private egg donor agency, and we have some great ones that we work with, there is an agency fee associated with that, and then sometimes there are monitoring fees because the egg donors don't live close to the office, so there's travel fees and monitoring fees that you have to add as well. So if you find your ideal egg donor among our database, amazing, fantastic. If you don't, reach out to me and I'll certainly connect you with some great colleagues who will offer you a wider selection of egg donors. But our egg donor database is I think, the largest private egg donor, clinic-based egg donor database in the United States.
Brilliant, wonderful. So for the attendees, this is your 5-minute warning. If you've got any questions, please, it's probably going to be less than 5 minutes, please do send them through. I know that we've answered a number of them as we've been going through, which is great. This is not a question, but it's a comment that's come through, and it's from Roy, and it just says, just want to send my big thanks and love to Steve and Dr. D. that with their great help, experience, and dedication, our Bella is 6 months old now. So thank you, you guys, all of you. It's because of you that there's a family there. And Dr. D, please don't cry.
No, do cry. Do cry.
No, he's going to. Look, this is him. Off he goes.
Richard,
and I think that
I want to interrupt you for just a second, because Dr. D, and I think, I'm arrogant, so I'll say me too, but one of the unique distinctions we have is our emotions and is the human connection, and the fact that we don't just care for our patients or parents, we care about them. And Dr. D, I think you should cry. So there you go.
Thanks.
and he does. You should see him when
Unlike Victoria, who is a robot.
Well, I've just never seen you cry, Victoria.
I'm sure she does. I'm sure every time she hangs up the phone. But on that note, we've had no other questions. And I would like to say, on behalf of everybody that's attended, Victoria, Said, Steve, thank you so very much. It was, as always, very informative. The information is amazing. Attendees, please, if you've got any questions, email me. I will pass on those questions to Victoria, Said, and Steve, and then we can go from there. So thank you so very much for giving up your evening and your day and your time today, everybody. And hopefully we'll talk to you very soon.
Lots of love to all of you.
God bless.
Thank you, Richard, for a chance to see you for like an hour, all of you, all the four of us, which is, I just miss meeting people like you that I really like. So thank you for this opportunity.
Feelings mutual.
Yes, very.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.